Hey everyone, welcome back to Rugadoom, where the dark doesn't just whisper, it dreams. I'm your host, and tonight's story is called I Saw the First Superhero End the World. It's a story about power, the kind humanity prays for, and the kind it was never meant to touch. When a government agent is assigned to oversee a man who can fly, heal, and bend light itself, he thinks he's watching the birth of a hero. But what he's really witnessing is the evolution of a god. So settle in, dim the lights, and listen close, because sometimes the brightest light casts the longest shadow. I was sitting at my desk, thumbing through the case files of a low-level gang/domestic terror group, trying to line up the evidence and witness testimony just right for a judge to approve a search warrant. The whole thing was a headache. Half lies, half hearsay. I don't spend a lot of time in the office, but when I do, I always notice the same things. The fluorescent lights hum like they're trying to hypnotize you. That stale, overcooked coffee smell never really leaves the air. Phones ring. People talk. Sometimes about leads, sometimes about weekend plans. It all kind of blurs together after a while. I was trying to make it all make sense when there was a knock at my office door. "Come in," I yelled, distracted, still scanning the paperwork. I heard the door open, footsteps, 2 sets, and the quiet scrape of polished shoes on tile. My supervisor, sure. But the other guy? New face. He had the full federal uniform, high and tight haircut, no stubble in sight, fitted black suit, earpiece, and the kind of sunglasses that belonged in a spy movie, not a field office. I'd barely registered the noise. Honestly, a grizzly bear could have walked in, and I probably wouldn't have noticed. But when the stranger stepped in, something in the room shifted, enough to make me finally look up. "Lance, this is Special Agent Moores from the DOD. He's come here personally to talk to you about a new case," my supervisor said, and I could hear the tension in his voice. The man always looked stressed, like the last time he slept was sometime during the Cold War. He wore his exhaustion like a uniform, bags under the eyes, crumpled shirt, coffee-stained teeth. Still, he cracked a half smile and nodded nervously. The Department of Defense doesn't just drop in on the FBI, not without a reason. "Well, I'll let you two talk it out," he said, and ducked out of the office like he couldn't get away fast enough. I hadn't really looked up until then, too wrapped up in the casework, but I finally glanced over. Moores stood there grinning like he'd just found a new toy. "So, the rumors about you are true," he said. "I can see why you were recommended." "Recommended?" That sounded like a headache I didn't need. "Special Agent Morris?" I asked without much interest. "Moores," he corrected, frowning slightly. "Look," I said, going back to my files, "I've got 4 other cases I'm juggling, and across those, I'm managing 6 informants, cross-checking statements, building timelines, and I'm sure you understand how critical it is that everything adds up. So I appreciate you making the trip, but if you're here to toss another case on my desk, I've got to pass." His smile came back like it never left. "Special Agent Lance Taylor," he began like he was reading from a resume. "Started out as a DHS coordinator, managed a laundry list of high-priority events, transferred to FBI counterintel, where, according to your file, you're responsible for taking down a half-dozen people who would have slipped right through the cracks. Calm under pressure, solid with assets. You're exactly who we need." I finally looked up at him. That smile was still there, like it was painted on. I leaned back in my shitty office chair and rubbed my eyes. "I'm guessing you didn't fly all the way out here to give me a compliment. Thanks, by the way, but let me tell you..." Moores cut me off. "First, you don't really have a choice. Second, all your current cases are being reassigned. And third, once you find out who your new asset is, you'll be the envy of the entire department." The way he said it, too slick, too casual, made it sound like we were about to go on some wild bender together. I hated him already, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't intrigued. "Asset?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. He told me he'd explain everything once we were airborne, en route to Nevada. Before we left, he asked if I had a go bag ready. Of course I did. In this line of work, you never knew when you'd get called away for a few days, or a few weeks. We left from Andrews Air Force Base on a private jet. I sat across from Moores, arms folded, waiting for him to get to the point. It wasn't easy letting go of the cases I'd been building for years. They'd become a part of me, but from the sound of it, I didn't have a say in the matter. He opened a briefcase and slid a file across the table. Tell me, Lance, do you believe in superheroes? I blinked, thought I misheard him. Superheroes? I chuckled, half annoyed. Is this some kind of joke? Moores shook his head. I had the same reaction, but take a look. He tapped the file. Vaughn Garrison, former Coast Guard, master's degree in astrophysics, worked with NASA's Deep Space Observatory program. On Tuesday, August 10th, 2021, an unidentified object crashed just outside the observatory. No radar signature. It was like it appeared out of nowhere. I opened the file. Dozens of pages, images, satellite photos, testimony. Vaughn was the first to investigate. Being the man of science that he is, he approached the crash site. As he got close, the object pulsed with light, then exploded. His team initially thought it was radioactive. They assumed the explosion was a reaction to something in our atmosphere. Moores paused, staring out the jet window before continuing. Emergency response was called. When they arrived, Vaughn was alive, but barely. From his navel to the top of his head, he had what looked like fourth-degree burns. Still, he was conscious. The med team ran scans. 0 radiation. On the way to the hospital, they noticed something even stranger. His skin was regenerating. By the time he arrived, it looked like he had a really bad sunburn, and even that was fading fast. He turned back to me. His face lit up like a kid with a new toy. He woke up 3 hours later. The sudden burst of movement as he sat up nearly destroyed the hospital bed and the ceiling above it. Then, without warning, he panicked and began to fly. I stared at him, still flipping through the pages. It felt like an elaborate prank, some classified training op for an experimental prototype. But Moores wasn't joking. He believed every word. After that, Washington went into full lockdown. Committees, closed-door meetings, absolute chaos. Eventually, we created Orbit, Office for Response to Biological, Interstellar, and Technological Threats. It's not public yet. We're building the infrastructure as we go. He leaned in slightly. We need someone to manage him, to monitor his mental state, emotional stability, health, intent. He's cooperative now. But let's be honest, this guy could decide to wipe us all out tomorrow. We need someone who knows how to handle people like him, someone he can trust. He smiled again. Between your work at FEMA and the Bureau, you were unanimously chosen. Still trying to process what I'd just heard, I thumbed through Vaughn's file in silence. Born in Galveston, Texas. Parents, Troy and Rita Garrison. A solid B average student. Joined the Coast Guard at 18. Earned commendations for his response during Hurricane Ike. Attended the University of Texas, then got his master's from Caltech. Later recruited to NASA's Deep Space program. A model citizen. The file was filled with service photos, Coast Guard operations, graduation ceremonies, trips to the Grand Canyon, amusement parks, childhood birthdays, just normal stuff. The kind of stuff that makes it harder to believe he could become a walking nuclear event. We landed at Nellis Air Force Base, where I was led to a massive white tent, one of those temporary government field labs, the kind with more secrecy than walls. Armed military police patrolled the perimeter in tight loops. No one gets within 50 feet of the walls without clearance, Moores said with a grin. MPs have orders to shoot on sight if anyone does. Inside, the tent was part science lab, part command center. Equipment I didn't recognize, monitors, scanners, data feeds. A constant low hum of activity, and in the center of it all was him, Vaughn Garrison. He looked nervous, confused, like a man who'd stumbled into the wrong room and wasn't sure how to leave without making it worse. His medium brown hair was messy, like he'd been running a hand through it for hours. He had a stocky, compact build, denser than his photos suggested, like he was built to take hits. The kid in the file looked average. The man standing in front of me didn't. Not anymore. He was being scanned by a scientist with some handheld device, while another scribbled notes so furiously it was like the pen might catch fire. Moores waved the scientists away. "Vaughn, meet your liaison, Special Agent Lance Taylor. He's here to give a face to this new situation we're all adjusting to." Vaughn turned to me with a faint, uncertain smile. You could tell he'd been through hell. There was something in his eyes, strain, maybe, or confusion, just barely hidden under the surface. Whatever it was, it didn't match the calm, smiling kid I'd just seen in those photos. This was someone trying hard to hold it together. "Hello, Special Agent Taylor," he said, almost timid. I extended my hand, but he shook his head. "I'm sorry. I'm not used to my strength yet. I don't want to hurt you." First time someone ever apologized for not shaking my hand, and meant it. "Understandable, son," I said, letting my hand drop. Moores excused himself to get an update, leaving the two of us standing there under the glare of bright halogen lights. As soon as he was gone, Vaughn relaxed a little, like he could finally breathe again. "So, how are you feeling, Mr. Garrison?" I asked. For a second, I saw a flicker of relief cross his face, like no one had thought to ask him that since the whole nightmare started. "You're the first person who's asked me that. Everyone else just wants readings or reports." "Honestly," he said, his voice shaking, "I'm nervous. They keep calling me the world's first superhero. They say I can do good, but right now I feel like a lab rat. They're trying to come up with some kind of training regimen, I think." He hesitated, then added, "They say it's about helping people, making the world safer, but I think it's also about showing off, improving America's image, maybe even flaunting their new weapon." I glanced around the tent. No one was paying us attention. I lowered my voice. "Do you want to be a superhero?" That caught him off guard. He looked at me like no one had ever asked him that either. Maybe they hadn't. He thought for a while before answering. "Yes and no," he said finally. "I mean, I'm living every kid's dream. I was given these abilities. I should use them for something good, right? When I was in the Coast Guard, there were things I couldn't stop, people I couldn't save. Now I can. But I get it. The government's scared. Hell, I'm scared. I just want to make a difference, that's all." His expression softened, his fear replaced by a small spark of hope. And even though I'd known him for maybe 5 minutes, that flicker of optimism rubbed off on me. A few months passed. Orbit had developed a full training program to help Vaughn harness his powers. Flight stabilization, light projection, energy control. They called him Vanguard. Blue suit, red and gold trim, half mask for plausible deniability. Someone upstairs thought the V and G logo combo made him look like a patriotic baseball team. But the kid wore it well, and the public ate it up. What got me was the branding. Red V, blue G outlined in gold. Same as his initials, Vaughn Garrison. That might have been a coincidence. Or it might have been cooked up before he even agreed to it. I didn't ask, didn't want to know. Soon after, they introduced him to the world. The rollout was cautious at first. His first big save? A collapsed bridge in Denver. 47 people pulled out of the wreckage. Footage of him lifting a school bus one-handed hit 12 million views in 2 hours. And just like that, Vanguard was a household name. Public reaction was mixed. Some people were inspired. Others were terrified. The religious crowd said he was an omen. The conspiracy types swore he was a weapon. But after he started saving people, disasters, hostage situations, floods, the tide turned. The world fell in love with Vanguard. Orbit expanded fast, too fast. What started as a small, closed-door task force turned into a multinational agency with authority across borders. Officially, they operated under global cooperation treaties. Unofficially, some nations were getting nervous. Everyone was watching Vanguard like he was a loaded gun pointed at the planet. A year later, a freak flood hit Tennessee. The air smelled like rot and diesel, Vaughn looked like a walking corpse by the end of it, soaked, drained, still moving. I'd never seen him tired before. That scared me more than anything. Vaughn worked around the clock for a week straight, barely stopping to eat. He redirected rivers, pulled families from rooftops, cleared debris with energy constructs. I might have slept 8 hours the whole week, tops. Vaughn saved hundreds. When the immediate danger passed, Orbit told us to stand down. Vaughn could have flown back to DC in an hour, but I convinced him to ride back with the team. Washington wanted regular mental health assessments. No surprise there. They were terrified he'd snap. Normally he was upbeat, always cracking jokes or asking about my cases back at the bureau. But that time, he seemed distant, tired. "You doing all right, V?" I asked. He didn't answer at first, just stared out the window like he wasn't really there. "Come on, man. You can tell me." "I'm fine," he said eventually. "Just weird dreams, that's all." "Dreams?" I pressed. He rubbed the back of his neck, frowning. "Yeah, but that's the thing. I don't remember them. I just wake up in a cold sweat. Sometimes I feel like I've been running or fighting, but I never remember what it was." That caught my attention. Whatever could shake a man like Vanguard must have been one hell of a dream. He looked over at me and smiled weakly. "You know, Lance, thanks for being my friend. I know you're my handler, but you actually care. I appreciate that." It caught me off guard. "It's no problem, kid. You're doing good work. You've saved a lot of lives." He nodded and went quiet again. At the time, I told myself it was nothing, just exhaustion. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried. Months went by. Vaughn became a natural at the job. He moved with confidence now, saving lives, preventing disasters, representing something people hadn't felt in a long time: hope. One morning, I was buried under a pile of emails. Thank you notes, media requests, the usual PR circus, when my office phone rang. It was Ron, one of the senior monitoring advisors. "Hey Lance, I need you to come down here." "Now," he said. His voice was low and tense, like a man trying to disarm a bomb with shaking hands. That tone got my attention. I made my way to his office. Ron's workspace looked like NASA Control had a baby with the Weather Channel. Rows of monitors showing international news, seismic graphs, radar data, security feeds, live cams. He looked pale, jittery. "What's going on?" I asked. "Vanguard's been doing strange things," he said. He gestured at his screens. I stepped closer. Each monitor showed footage from around the world: Tokyo, Moscow, Rome, Berlin, Rio. Vaughn was in every one of them, standing completely still, same posture, same blank expression, just staring. "He's been appearing in random locations across the globe," Ron said, voice trembling. "All this happened within about 4 hours. I felt the hairs rise on the back of my neck. "You're saying he's teleporting?" "I don't know what to call it," Ron said. "We can't track him. He's there 1 second, gone the next. And in every clip, he looks..." He stopped himself. "It's not good optics, Lance. The higher-ups are calling it international vigilance, but the countries he's been popping up in, they're not buying it. Yeah, a superhuman god figure silently appearing in your streets doesn't exactly scream friendly." I called Vaughn immediately and asked him to come in. When he arrived, I showed him the footage. His reaction was genuine shock. "What? I don't remember any of this," he said, eyes wide. "When was this?" Ron ran him through the timestamps, the locations. Vaughn just kept shaking his head. "I don't know. Maybe I was sleepwalking? I swear, I don't remember." His expression shifted from confusion to horror, like he was realizing something inside him might not belong to him anymore. "I know you're not going to like this," I said carefully, "but they're probably going to want to put a tracker on you, just until we figure this out." He nodded slowly, still pale. "Yeah, okay." I turned to leave when Ron stopped me. "There's one more thing," he said quietly. He entered a password and opened a hidden folder on his system. I didn't show this to the higher-ups. Figured it'd only cause a panic. But you need to see it. The video feed came up, a small-town post office in South Dakota. Vaughn stood beside a mailbox, motionless at first. Then he started laughing. Not a normal laugh. This was deeper, rawer. The kind of laugh you hear right before someone breaks completely. There was no audio, but just watching it chilled me to my core. Something about it felt wrong, ancient even. Ron's fingers trembled on the mouse. He didn't blink while the footage played. His lips were pressed into a tight line like he was holding something in or holding something back. Ron shut the video off. The silence that followed felt heavy. Unsettling didn't even begin to describe it. Something in my gut twisted, and I knew, deep down, that this wasn't over. There were no more incidents for a while. I told the brass Vaughn had been under pressure, probably sleepwalking due to stress. They didn't buy it entirely, but they didn't want to push too hard either. Washington was still walking the razor's edge, trying to manage him without provoking him. They agreed. He'd wear a tracker, but only while he slept. A compromise, they said. Temporary. Weeks passed. The dreams started soon after. At first, they were the kind you don't remember. I'd wake up in a cold sweat with the distinct sensation that something had happened. My heart would be pounding, my skin cold, my mouth dry. Then the dreams started to take shape. In them, I was alone in a white void. No sound, no temperature, just a colorless space that stretched on forever. I walked slowly, head down, watching my feet move like I wasn't really in control of them. Then, I'd feel something, like gravity shifting. I'd stop, and I'd look up. There it stood, a thing, massive. The only way I can describe it is some kind of deer, if a deer were the size of a skyscraper and carved from dark matter. Its body was an inky, ocean-deep blue, like the sea under a starless sky. Its antlers branched like the limbs of trees or the tendrils of galaxies, mountains of bone reaching in every direction, each one wrapped in swirling nebulae. Its eyes pierced through me. Two where they should be, and a third, dead center in its forehead, triangular in placement, immense, endless. All three stared at me, and in that gaze I felt stripped of everything, not just clothes or skin, but identity. I was a flea beneath a god. I was nothing. Then I'd wake up, heart racing, gasping. The dreams came every few days. At first I tried to dismiss them. Stress, trauma, whatever. But deep down, I knew. People don't dream the same dream over and over unless something's wrong. In one dream, I looked closer at one of the flowers blooming on the deer's back. Inside its open petals, I swear I saw Vaughn's face. Not the man he was, but the boy. Smiling, waiting, like he'd been part of this all along. Weeks passed. Vaughn seemed normal, more confident, more polished. He was becoming the face of global protection until NASA called. It was a quiet Thursday morning. An object had entered Earth's atmosphere, fast, humanoid-shaped, and not of this world. I grabbed Vaughn and we deployed via orbit helicopter. Just before boarding, that deer flashed in my mind again. No reason, just popped in. I shook it off. The impact site wasn't far. Vaughn got there first. I radioed in for an update. So, his voice crackled through the comms. You guys remember Close Encounters? Well, imagine that alien on steroids. We arrived minutes later. The thing standing in the middle of a destroyed cornfield looked like a textbook alien. Gray skin, huge black eyes, but it had 4 arms, each one the size of a human torso, and it stood almost 10 feet tall, muscle packed onto muscle, like it had been built for one thing only, violence. It charged Vaughn immediately. No monologue, no first contact, no explanation. Just war. The alien moved like a blur, arms whipping in a whirlwind of punches like some nightmare version of a Gatling gun. Vaughn tanked it, took every hit on the chin, and answered with a cross that would have decapitated a lesser being. The alien staggered but came back with a haymaker that sent Vaughn into the earth, literally embedded him into the dirt. We were all holding our breath. Then something happened. Something wrong. Vaughn's body started to glow, not the usual golden light we'd come to expect, but a pale, icy blue. His energy shifted, and so did his posture. He stood up, slow, too slow, like something else was piloting him, and then he snapped. Aggressive, unrelenting, furious, he attacked with a brutality I'd never seen, not just from him, from anyone. He tore into the alien, ripped off all 4 of its arms, slammed it into the ground, then fired a focused beam of light, blue, not gold, directly through its chest. A clean hole, maybe a foot wide. The fight was over in under a minute. We were stunned. Not because he won, but because of how he did it. There was no restraint, no control, just annihilation. We recovered the body. Vaughn sat near the helicopter, sipping bottled water, silent. "That was pretty incredible," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I didn't know you had—" I froze. His face, that 1,000-yard stare. Eyes wide, mouth slack, barely blinking. The dread hit me in the stomach like a cold hammer. That wasn't me," he said. He looked up at me, pleading. "Lance, I blacked out. 1 second I'm fighting, then I come to, and it's over. I don't remember any of it. I don't like that I don't remember." His voice cracked. "What's happening to me?" I didn't know, not really, but something about him, something in his voice, or in his eyes, felt wrong, like a storm gathering behind clear skies, and I couldn't shake it. We ran every test we could think of. Physically, he was fine. Stable vitals, normal scans. But there was something new, a faint frequency variation coming from him. Background noise, the scientists said. Nothing to worry about. I worried anyway. Vanguard was put on sabbatical. We told him to rest, see his parents, try to reconnect with normal life. He agreed. His parents were proud, supportive. They had no idea what was really going on. Hell, I wasn't sure I knew what was going on. Meanwhile, the dreams got worse. Now, instead of just seeing the deer, I was floating beside it, flying in that empty void, watching the beast move beneath me like a living mountain of starlight and smoke. Its fur shimmered like mist, coiling and shifting like fog over a dark moor. But hidden in that mist, if you looked closely enough, were flowers, small, delicate blooms, barely visible, scattered across its body like stars in a constellation. Each flower opened slowly. Inside each one, a face. Some looked like the alien Vaughn had killed. Others were stranger, reptilian, insectoid, one like a twisted anteater. And all of them were laughing. Not just laughing, singing, in a way that became laughter, or maybe it was the other way around. And then, I started to laugh with them. I wasn't sleeping much anymore. Caffeine pills, energy drinks, whiskey, whatever it took to stay awake. I'd tried quitting a few times, couldn't take the stress. But every time I got close, the higher-ups reminded me that Vaughn only trusted me. Switching handlers could destabilize him, they said, could trigger something. That's the last thing anybody wanted. Something new hit Earth's radar at 9:12 a.m. Not from space this time. The trajectory didn't match any known meteor pattern. It just appeared in the middle of a small New Jersey town. Reports came in describing a 13-foot wolf-shaped creature, armor-plated hide, a single golden eye burning in its skull. It didn't talk. It didn't roar. It simply stood and then started tearing through everything in reach. Orbit scrambled every resource we had. Vanguard led the charge. He came in fast, a streak of blue and gold against a gray morning sky, and hit the thing like a missile. For 20 minutes they fought, punches like thunderclaps, shockwaves rippling through the air. Vaughn finally won, driving the monster into the ground hard enough to crack pavement 3 streets over. The world cheered again. From my monitor in DC, I watched it unfold in real time. For a moment, pride bloomed in my chest. Then he turned toward one of the cameras, and I saw it, just for a heartbeat. A third eye, glowing faintly on his forehead, exactly like the deer from my dreams. When I blinked, it was gone. I replayed the footage again and again, frame by frame. Nothing, but I knew what I'd seen. That night, back in my apartment, I poured a glass of whiskey, swallowed a couple of sleeping pills, and tried to convince myself I was hallucinating. My coffee table was littered with Vaughn's files. I flipped through them out of habit. Birth records, Coast Guard commendations, family photos. One picture stopped me cold. Vaughn at maybe 14, posing at a wildlife museum, a stuffed deer in the background. His shirt said Space Camp, his grin wide and goofy, but just above his brow, in the grain of the photo, was a faint mark, like a third eye burned into the film. I slammed the file shut. I turned on the TV for distraction, anything but that goddamn deer. The local news was covering a new laughter epidemic. People were breaking into hysterics in public, doctors baffled, psychologists overwhelmed. I killed the power and went to bed, praying the drugs and alcohol would finally drown the dreams. They didn't. The laughter followed me there. More creatures began to fall from the sky. One in South Carolina, a tank-sized hybrid of mammoth and gorilla. Then Paris, Moscow, Beijing, Tokyo, Dallas, Salt Lake City, Green Bay, Cuba, each one worse than the last. Every 2 or 3 weeks, another impact. Each battle left another city in ruins, and each time, only Vanguard stood between us and extinction. He fought relentlessly, but the fights were getting longer. The shine in his eyes dimmed. Between missions, he'd sit in silence, hands trembling, as if something inside him was eating away at his humanity. Public opinion shifted from worship to fear. People didn't question if he'd lose. They wondered what would happen when he did. We examined the remains of every creature he killed. Radiation-proof, bio-proof, resistant to heat, cold, acid, vacuum. Nothing on Earth could have hurt them, except him. Meanwhile, I was falling apart. Sleep was a rumor. My veins buzzed with caffeine and morphine. I told myself I needed them just to function, but truth was, I couldn't face closing my eyes. The dreams had become too vivid. One night, after a cleanup operation in Los Angeles, I saw it sprayed across a half-collapsed wall, a blue deer with 3 eyes. Underneath, in dripping paint, "You will all sing for me." I wanted to tear my own brain out. Then came the big one. The sky split open above Branson, Missouri. A shape fell through, part squid, part demon, all nightmare. Its tentacles blotted out the sun. Power grids failed for 100 miles. Vanguard went in first, but this time, the monster swatted him out of the air like a fly. He hit the ground at the speed of a meteor, got back up, tried again, over and over, each time slower. We could feel the hopelessness radiating across the world. Then something changed. The cameras caught it first. A glow, bright enough to turn night into day. Vaughn rose from the crater, body blazing with the same cold blue light as before, but stronger. His form sharpened until he looked carved from living energy, and then I saw them, antlers, rising from his skull like radiant branches. A third eye burning in the center of his forehead. I fell to my knees. Around me, people began to snicker. At first, soft, then louder, then uncontrollable. Vaughn, no, whatever he'd become, raised one shining hand. A blinding flash filled the city. When it cleared, the demon was gone, not destroyed, erased. No cheering this time, just silence, awe, dread. He drifted upward and flew away. They found him later, standing on the roof of headquarters, motionless, overlooking DC. Tests said he was alive, heartbeat, brain activity, everything normal, but he didn't move, didn't eat, didn't speak. For 3 weeks he stood there, a statue of light. During that time I maybe slept 5 hours total. My body was collapsing. The morphine barely took the edge off. The dreams had become constant, no longer visions, but realities I visited every time I blinked. The deer filled them all. The flowers on its body bloomed and sang. I laughed until I cried, until I thought my skull would split. Finally, I broke. I went to confront him. I looked like hell, stained shirt, shaking hands, pupils the size of quarters. But I didn't care. I knew how to move through orbit security without being noticed. I'd been there from the start. When I reached the roof, he was still standing there, glowing against the night sky. "What do you want?" I shouted. My voice cracked. "Answer me, you big blue deer bastard. Answer me." My knees buckled. I sobbed into my palms. Then, movement. He turned. My stomach clenched like someone had dropped a live wire inside me. He looked down with that same blank expression, then smiled, a huge, unnatural grin, and shot into the sky. The alarms went off seconds later. He was heading for DC proper. I followed the task force in a convoy, sirens screaming. By the time we arrived, the White House was gone. So were half the monuments. Crowds had gathered. Senators, staffers, civilians, all staring upward with the same empty expression. I shoved through them until I could see. Vanguard floated above the crater, rearranging debris, bricks, steel, dirt, into a massive throne on the White House lawn. When it was finished, he sat down. Then the laughter started again. First a few chuckles, then hundreds, then thousands, until the whole world was laughing. I don't know how long it's been, years, maybe, decades, centuries. Time stopped meaning anything the moment the world began to laugh, when every voice on earth joined that sound. Pure, unhinged laughter rising like a tidal wave. It was as if reality itself cracked open, and we changed. I watched it happen. People around me started to convulse, not in pain, more like they were giving in to something. Legs split and stretched, feet driving into the soil like roots, arms unfolded into long green leaves, faces bloomed into petals, soft, vivid, impossibly beautiful. Every human being became a flower, not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. I don't know why I stayed as I am. Maybe something in me held on. Maybe the drugs in my system disrupted the process. Maybe I was cursed to remember. Or maybe he left me behind on purpose. I've watched them ever since. The flowers. They don't move, don't wilt. They just exist, frozen in praise. And he watches them, Vanguard, still seated on his throne of twisted stone and memory, glowing faintly blue, antlers curled toward the stars. The third eye in his forehead never closes. At some point, he stood and descended from the throne. He walked straight to me. I should have screamed, run, prayed, but I couldn't move, couldn't blink. He looked down at what was left of me, not with malice, not with joy, with sorrow. A single word escaped him. "I'm sorry." And then he turned and returned to his throne, surrounded by a garden of blooming souls, singing their endless laughter song to a God who never asked to be worshipped. I used to think my job was to protect people, keep the chaos out, but I see it now. I was just a witness, the last one left to remember the world before. The last one still asking questions no one wants answered. Maybe that's what I was chosen for. Not to stop the end, just to see it happen.